Hi there, Lewis here, Lewis Hanshaw. I'm going to talk to you today about some things that have been coming up to me recently about issues with regards to music and our current way of doing things. I've been thinking a lot about frequency and some of the inherent issues, more than likely by design. Get your tinfoil hats ready. About current the Western system. Now, so this is Solfeggio Secrets Part 2, and it's going to give a bit of background as to, well, where I'm coming from as a musician, and I'm starting to notice the topic of frequency coming out a lot more. Certain healing frequencies of nature, frequencies that exist, like there's a quote, music is geometry in time. And there's plenty of examples of frequencies in nature, fractals, mathematics, geometry. There's something there, and it fascinates me. And I think that we can work in harmony with some of these. And there's people that have done a lot more work than I have, and I will hopefully be leaning on some of them moving forwards. Now, frequency healers. There are frequency healers that use certain frequencies to heal the body. The ancient civilizations used frequency to levitate things, to build, to manipulate matter. You know, there's a lot in frequency, and I think our current understanding of frequency is a bit limited. So I'm coming at this from a musician's perspective, and I'm a bit of a techie. And maybe those two combined will help with what I can offer to the world. So I've written some notes. Current issues. Can you see that? Current issues with modern tuning. Okay, so if you're going to go with the just go out on a limb here and say that there may be some not so benevolent entities or people. Let's say people. The people that have been doing the actually enacting these things on this 3D plane. Let's say there's some controllers who maybe had this esoteric knowledge or occult knowledge or knowledge that there are these beneficial or good frequencies. If you didn't want Joe Public to have access to that knowledge, one of the things that you might do is to keep certain frequencies hidden in some way, shape or form, or harder to find, or just less common that you might accidentally stumble across them. All right? One of the things I think would do that is called Equal Temperament. So I'm just gonna I've got a couple of assumptions. One of them is that the piano became very, very popular, and it was like the orchestra kind of really the focal point of many orchestras is the piano. Now, piano, as many of you know, cannot be easily retuned. So like my guitar, I can just, so I'm in this tuning, I can tune the E down to a D. All right, and I can do that with all the strings very simply. I've got a guitar tuner that will enable me to do that, but I can't do that. You can't do that very easily on a piano. More often than not, you need a specialist with special tools to come and tune a piano. So we've got the focal point of an orchestra using, at the moment, concert pitch, which is A equals 440 hertz. So that means the A above middle C on the piano, the frequency is 440 hertz. So that means the strings vibrate backwards and forwards 440 times a second. The second is a factor that we might get onto later, but the second could be an arbitrary measure of time. You know, if the second was longer, then the 440 hertz would be a different number. So, you know, let's not get too hung up on the numbers for now. Now, so the piano is very rigid, it's very inflexible, it's very useful for being able to play in many different keys. You can play in C, you can play in F, you can play in B minor, you can play in all the different major minor keys. And it's kind of like a best fit for being able to play in all keys, but it's never really in tune for any of them. Jacob Collier, amazing musician, he's hit upon this. He does a very good example of this in one of his talks, and he plays a note on the piano and then he sings a major third above it. So the do, re, mi, and he says this is what it should be, and then he plays it on the piano and the piano's out, and it's like, wow, okay, it's a really, really good, I'm filming. Sorry. It was a really good example of how the pianos are actually out of tune, and not many people know this. So, and it's that it's trying to fit for all keys, which I think it's useful, it's really useful, but when everything's based around that and all the other instruments are tuning with the piano, and everyone has to tune to the piano because the piano can't tune to anything else. Musical scales have moved on a lot over the centuries, and time again is another one of these things that I'm not too sure about right now. But there's certain intervals that are pleasing to the ear. Okay, so you've got, so this is a D, right? And this is a D, D, D. Now there's certain other intervals, so this is an octave, right? Sound the same. The reason they sound the same, well, they sound very, very similar. One's an octave higher, but the reason they work like that and they sound very, very similar is because they have a ratio of 2 to 1. Okay, the frequencies are 2 to 1. Okay, so while one of the notes is waved like this, the other note is like this, and every 2 peaks of the higher note will match every peak of the lower note. So you've got a 2 to 1 ratio, and that's like this mathematical ratio between the lower note and the higher note. Okay, so let's say this was vibrating at say 500 hertz. This would be 1000 hertz. And that's why you've got this relationship between the notes. They sound very, very similar. They're both the same letter. Okay, so they're both Ds. Now you've also got a major third. So do, re, mi. And that has the ratio of 5 to 4. So for every 5 waveforms on the higher note, the lower note would be 4. Every 4 waveforms, the both peaks would match up. Every 5 notes for the higher note, or every 5 peaks on the chart versus every 4 peaks on the chart. And these are the mathematically beautiful, pleasing ratios. That's where you get that beautiful, it's a pleasing sound to the ear because it's mathematically, geometrically correct. Okay? Now, with a piano that's designed to be never really in tune for one particular key and kind of equally spaced out so that it kind of works in all the keys, you're missing this mathematical geometry. It's just not there. And I really think that these harmonics and these numbers and the way they all work together to describe the frequencies and how these notes are pleasing in the... These all have mathematical ratios. So the fifth would be 3 to 2. Okay, and you can see these on waveforms, and it's pleasing to the ear. So when you've got a piano that's very, very rigid, can't tune it, it's best fit for all keys, these mathematical ratios are missing. Okay, and I think that's important because we're talking about subtle subtle things with regards to frequencies. You know, especially we're talking about non-tangible, non-physical topics. You know, we're talking about spiritual sciences. We're talking about things that we can't see, that we can't touch. So these things that you might not really hear very clearly may well be very significant. And when you think about all the people in the world, if everyone is listening to mathematically ungeometric music, maybe that's affecting us at a cellular level. You don't know. I think it might be. So I guess what I'm trying to do is to gain an understanding as to the significance of how these frequencies work, how they sound pleasing to the ear, and how maybe things have been manipulated so that we're not necessarily being able to hear the beauty, the geometry that is inherent and it's available to us, but not when you play the piano. So that's one of the problems, is standard equal temperament. Equal temperament is called. It's where the piano is sort of the octave is equally divided up into 12 semitones, but it's not really paying homage to, so just been into France, it's not paying real tribute to the mathematical beauty, the geometry that exists, because it's hard to get an instrument that's in tune to all the keys, so you could play one song in F and play another song in G, and it sound alright. There's plenty of examples on YouTube. You can look at it's called just intonation, which is where these ratios are tuned in perfectly, and there's a ratio for the octave, the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, minor third, major seven. Interestingly enough, I'm going to kind of jump over because there's one that's called a tritone, okay, which is the flattened fifth for you music people out there. The flattened fifth is called the tritone, which is 3 whole tones. And interestingly enough, that doesn't really have a very well defined ratio. So that's this, that used to be called Diabolis in Musica, the devil's interval, or the devil's note. And some people say that the ratio for that is 45 to 32. Some people say it's 64 to 45. So it's very, very messy in terms of this mathematical geometry. What does that mean? Well, you do get some nice sounding flattened fifths that happen naturally in a 7th chord. So I'm down tuned to D. So we're often used to, we know the sound of the blues chords, you know, like E7 and then A7. So in these chords, you actually do have a flattened fifth. That there. That is a flattened fifth. So you do get it a lot, very commonly in blues, as a part of a 7th chord, like a major chord with a 7th in it, a dominant 7th. I know I'm getting a bit geeky here, but bear with me. But there was some, I know from when I first started to play guitar, and some of the old music that my dad lent to me. So Black Sabbath did that was one of their songs on, I think it was the first song on their Black Sabbath album, and that's a big fat flattened fifth. Now we know Ozzy Osbourne and them lot, not exactly the pinnacle of spirituality, should we say. Similarly, Jimi Hendrix at the start of Purple Haze, we've got that. is the flattened fifth. It's the tritone. It's the devil's tone. Yeah, so I'm thinking Tavistock Institute, social engineering, they are going to be using key players like massive, well-known, influential musicians to introduce things to shape society. There's plenty of information about that. Do your own research. So I'm just thinking now, I'm starting to connect more dots and realizing that maybe there's a lot more effort gone into this than I previously realized. You know, so that's just one. That's the first point anyway. So equal temperament, the division between the notes in a lot of our instruments, even the guitar. You know, my guitar's out of tune all the time. I can't tune it very easily because the frets are fixed, and there's some work been done in that area. But to have a one-size-fits-all instrument with fixed frets is going to be very difficult. It's going to work well in certain keys, and then as soon as you navigate away into different keys, playing in, you know, F sharp minor, and then B flat major, you know, it's going to run into problems. It's not going to sound pleasing, and you're not going to have these mathematical ratios, the geometry. So that's the first issue I wanted to talk about. The second issue I wanted to talk about, which I touched upon, I mentioned earlier, is the solfeggios. The solfeggios. So there's 6 main solfeggio tones from my understanding so far, and we'll go into this a lot more in this series. That do different things apparently. I want to check into the validity of this because I want to see what kind of evidence there is, what can I follow up on to know that these solfeggios are actually doing something. But I am pretty sure that there's something in that and that they exist, and the fact that the concert pitch that we have, the piano being tuned to 440 Hertz and everyone else tuning to the piano, the fact that that doesn't hit any of the solfeggio tones when you're tuning to that. I did actually read, it's in this book, 528, the miracle tone. Some of you may have heard of the miracle tone, the 528 Hertz, the love tone. Prosperity Key of Love by Leonard Horowitz, Dr. Leonard Horowitz. He's saying that with standard tuning or concert pitch at A equals 440 Hertz, the F sharp is the flattened fifth, the devil's tone, away from 528 Hertz. So if you play an F sharp, that's close to 741 Hertz, which is the devil's tone away, devil's tritone away from 528, which is fascinating if true. I need to look into it a bit more. The calculations I've done so far, I think it would be A equals 441 would put you to that F sharp at 741 specifically. But we're getting really geeky now. So the solfeggios, I'm working along the lines of the solfeggio tones are beneficial. They don't sound good together, by the way. They do not sound nice when played together at all. I do not like the sound of them played together. It's not a very pleasing sound. They're not in relation. They're not mathematically really related to each other in any way that I can determine. So they're not in any kind of ratio with one another. They're like independent frequencies from one another that don't sound nice together. But I think if they might be, let's say a common theory is that each one is related to a certain chakra, a certain energy point in your body or in part of your spirit body or your energetic being, and each of those would have a resonant frequency that these solfeggio tones resonate with. So I'm thinking that there's certain things that we could maybe tune specifically to these solfeggio frequencies. Let's say we've got a song that, actually funny enough, I'm doing this right now. We've got a song that's in C major, okay? One of the closest solfeggio tone to the C note in terms of frequency is the 528 Hertz miracle tone. So there's it's a slightly sharp than a regular C, slightly sharper than a regular C, and it is your C then becomes 528. So if you tune your guitar tuner, let's say you've got a guitar tuner, you'd have to put your A equals 444. So if you had this to 444, then the C becomes 528 Hertz. So that is, if I play the frequency on my phone, 528, let's just put it on. I've got a tone generator on here. Okay. So I've actually got this guitar tuned up slightly so that the C is 528 Hertz. So that is in tune with the love vibration, the miracle tone, supposedly repairs DNA. Okay, so I'm able to tune my guitar so that the note of the key that I'm playing the song in is in tune with the solfeggio tone. And because there's 6 of them at least, maybe more, and maybe we'll get more as more chakras come online, if that's the thing, I don't know, I'm not an expert yet. Now, if that's something we can do, rather than looking at one size fits all, I'm thinking that it's something that we could do to tune individually. So let's say there's a song in the key of F, we'll find the closest solfeggio to the key of F and tune appropriately. So if that means bring it down a bit, bring it up a bit, and then the music will be in tune perfectly with the closest solfeggio there is to that key. All right, so I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail. So there's things that we could do to kind of counteract the malevolence that has been done against us, that we have consented to, and it's all part of our journey in waking up and growing and deciding who we want to be. So one of the things that we could do, what can we do? So we can tune up and down to hit the solfeggios. I'll be going into this more in the future. There's instruments that have got fixed scales, so things like hang drums, you know, they're ding 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 boom boom boom. That's not exactly what they sound like. Things like panpipes that are specifically to one key. They've got one scale, and that scale is fixed, and you can only play one scale, but it's perfectly in tune. So we could have instruments like that that are tuned for the solfeggios, as an idea. We could tune the guitar up or down. Leonard Horowitz has suggested to tune pianos so that the white keys on a piano are in the key of C major. So every time you hit a C, it's going to be either 528 or a multiple of that. But even then, you've got the issue, as I described before, where pianos are using equal temperament. So that's kind of like, it's getting closer, but I think there's ways of getting really, maybe even closer than that. So we've got the two issues combined: standard temperament and the fact that we're miles away from all these solfeggio tones. Okay, so what else was there? Yeah, there's other instruments like there's certain organs I saw earlier today. There's organs that can move the different pipes around. and to change their temperament based upon the key that they're in. And this is all just to get this mathematical geometry. I know some people might not even hear the difference, but you can actually hear the kind of whoa, 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 as the notes are in dissonance with each other, and you don't get that when there's this meshing of the geometric, the waveforms lining up perfectly. You get this really pleasing non-dissonant sound. I mean, great, yeah, I know there's plenty of times where dissonance is useful. It creates mood, it creates a certain type of energy, but we don't necessarily want dissonance all the time. And that's the problem we've got, is we are all listening to dissonance all the time. What does that do to our internal cellular makeup? What does it do to our minds, to our soul, our spirit? What does it do? Okay, so I'm trying to think, how can we change that for the better? And we're going to need the musicians on board to do that, I think, because we're part of raising the vibration. We're part of providing the joy and transmitting the love and the positive messages to everyone. So let's learn about this, and let's see what we can do, what's inherently wrong with the way things are at the moment. One of those is, as I said, standard, equal temperament, which serves a purpose. I get it. But if we're starting to look at using frequencies as a healing modality, as a way of feeling good, let's not overlook the issues mathematically, sonically, that are preventing us from making as much progress as we could. Okay, so we need to bear these ratios in mind, these mathematical ratios in mind. So the pure major thirds, minor thirds, fifths, it's all in the maths. It's all there, the geometry in music. Okay, what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, I just wanted to say something briefly about, some people say about the various solfeggio frequencies, and they get hung up on the numbers, like, oh, the number XYZ, no, 1, 2, 3, not XYZ, the number, say the number 5 to 8. This number is specific because it's like the fourth prime number, or I'm paraphrasing, I'm not even making any sense, but what I'm saying is, I'm not too hung up on about the numerical value of the frequencies. The reason being is because this hertz is cycles per second. Okay, so if a second happened to be a bit longer than it currently is, the number would be different. So I'm not too hung up about the numbers itself. Okay, it's more about if there are these solfeggio tones and they do something, I want to match those and then match harmonically with that entirely as much as I can, because if we're matching the harmonics as well, the major third, the fifth, the octave, that's all going to contribute to that solfeggio tone. That's where I'm going with this. So rather than a sort of we're getting closer, we've got a piece of music with a sine wave in the background, I'm talking about so that the major third, the minor thirds, the fifths, the octaves, they all join in together with that tone to make the picture a lot more complete, and to make that the healing benefit from that tone a lot more complete and a lot more powerful. Okay, rather than most of the time, every now and again you'll hear that solfeggio tone, but if the entire piece, the intention around the song or the piece is around that tone, then there's going to be a lot more magic happening in a positive direction. Okay, so that's part 2 of the Solfeggio Secrets. I'm going deep, guys. I do apologise if it's a bit too much. Let me know if you've got any questions. If you're a musician, if you're into this stuff, get in touch. Get in touch. If you know any musicians who might be into this kind of thing, get in touch. I'm doing all my music myself. I'm interested in talking to other musicians that are into this kind of stuff, that are, awake to the issues of the world, where we're going. And that's it for now, alright? So, apologies for the super techiness of it. I'm trying to make it accessible. It is hard for me to think like a non-musician, because I've been a musician for such a long time. So if there are people out there that aren't necessarily musicians would like to know more about it, please just hit me up in the comments. You can get me on email, lewishanshaw@protonmail.com. I'll put that in the box below. All right, I hope you're all having a wonderful day, wonderful week, and lots of love to you all, and I'll see you soon in the next one. Thanks, bye.
Let the light shine in, let it heal your soul, take away your pain and make you whole. Let the light shine in, you will never feel the same. Break you